And by the way, one thing I should mention about the Jerry the Jew play is the title, subject to the same. You'll notice it comes. I have plays that have the Merchant of Venice, Lorenzo, Act 5, Scene 1. So that quote, subject to the same, is the Jews from the speech of the Jew in the Merchant of Venice, where he's talking about Jews are subject to the same. If you cut me, I bleed, kind of thing. So they're subject to the same prejudice as anyone else. And if you look at a lot of the plays that I'm doing, the last 5 or 6 plays, when I use titles like The Obscure Selvages or I Other Than Human, to put it in context, you can always look. They will have an epigraph, and that epigraph will have the source of the play's title with a different quote. So, for example, the next play, which is on the death of my mother, Obscure Selvages, that comes from Esthétique du Mal by Wallace Stevens, where I also have the quote there. Perhaps after death, the non-physical people in paradise, itself non-physical, may by chance observe the green corn gleaming and experience the minor of what we feel. So that's where the term talking about obscure selvages, and a selvages is a way to sew or to knit to get stop something from falling out. So an obscura selvage is a way to.
Your mother references it too in this play.
Yeah.
I thought that this was probably one of your best plays that I've read so far. I think that it has a devastating end, and is generally one of your most emotional plays. And this is how it happens. I haven't lost either of my parents, but I have lost loved ones. And this is how it goes, where you're there day after day watching them whittle away. You also put it into 17 days, which I don't know whether you did that for dramatic effect or not, but it works since you're using prisoner titles, everything from Arrival to Fallout.
Yeah, well, and that actually was. My mother did die, and I do have the actual days of, he says, from like May 8th or May 9th or the 25th. The play set in May of 2009. And so my mother did have to starve herself for 17 days before she finally died. And she did go, and it's basically a recitation of what happened with a little minor tweaks. She did, after a few days after stopping eating, she was stronger than she had been. And I remember Jessica saying, my God, she's immortal.
So let's talk about the basic gist of this one. I don't know how much fidelity it has with you staying there for as long as you did. Were you there hours upon hours with Helen?
No, I would go. I mean, some days I'd be there for 2 or 3 hours to change her stuff. She had this hospice people coming in. One was this really nasty Christian woman who was trying to guilt trip my mother for wanting to end her life. She did see the woman in blue. I have the state. This is another thing where I'm trying to. Helen, when she moves in her mind, she isn't walking. In her mind, she's walking, but I have the stagehands moving her hospital bed, which shows the dissonance between what she perceives and whatnot. This is why I don't have an actor playing the woman in blue.
You have that too when she's slipping into memories as well, such as when you're at the airport after leaving New York and heading to Minnesota. You have the stagehand move her in her hospital bed as she's reliving this memory.
And I also believe that's the first reference. You see in one of my earlier plays, there's an offhanded reference of one of these plays. There's an offhanded reference made to Gino Vincetti, and also here we get an offhand reference to Manny Cole. We hear Manny Cole being mentioned in the Manfred Cole, a baggage Area 51, Area 51. The famous UFO thing.
So one would assume that it's a shared universe thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that there is a shared universe. In this last play I just did, one of the boyfriends of the woman is a Bit von Rheingold porno addict, and so he has the 5-pack of Sex Farces by Bit von Rheingold, and the main character is reading off the titles of the Sex Farces, and she's like, "This is crap." So it is a shared universe. But I'm never going to have any of the major novel characters. There will be just offhand, a character said, that's where Gino Vincetti lives in one of the plays. And here we hear Manny Cole. I've got another one where I'm going to have Henry Matsumi have his credit card rejected at a restaurant or something.
It's interesting that Manny was sort of extinguished in a play-like novel. in '64, and then the next Doppelganger came out in with getting Wagner into the plays.
Yeah.
So it was almost this foreshadowing.
It is a shared universe. In this play, Aunt Darla comes back. Aunt Darla, I'm going to eventually, 10 or 12 plays from now, I've got my dad's death play that'll be coming up, and Darla will have a bigger role in that. That's going to be one of these long plays, and it's probably a play I'll do a few months from now when I want to do something 45, 50,000 words again, a longer play. But I do have one scene with my mother basically telling off Aunt Darla. And I think I maybe have her walk in that scene rather than, because it's not a memory so much or a fantasy as it's a memory where she steps out of the bed. And so we get a little bit of Aunt Darla there. Interestingly, I don't have my dad. My dad appears, but he doesn't say anything in the play. He's just representative of this ideal because my mother adored my father and my dad, and so he's this idealized person. We know if we know from anyone who is reading or watching a cycle of these plays, if some insane person ever wanted to do all of these plays, over the course of a couple of years at some theater, we would know that Eddie Wagner, George Wagner, exists and what he was like a little bit. But in here, he's just a representative. And we get some of the antagonism between Jessica and my mother. We get that kind of thing. But it's basically, I could have, and this is a good example of a play where I cut back. I could have had the hospice woman, the Christian woman. I could have done a couple of scenes of conflict with me yelling at her as I did in real life. But it wasn't necessary for this play. That's a superfluous person. I don't want to have her there. It's more about Danny and his mother. And in a sense, this could also, and in a way, a lot of these plays have similarities of 3 or 4 other plays, and they'll interlock one way. For example, this is similar to the Henry Miller play because this is about a person dying. It's a different context, but Danny is looking back on the death of his mother or the death of his co-worker. Other than that, they're dissimilar. This play is not as consciously poetic. The Henry Miller play also harkened back to the play with the black sisters, black people, death, and we have the death of the mother there, which then also, this is a companion piece to that play, too. There the mother is dying of Alzheimer's. Here she's dying of her own choice.
The emotional wallop comes through the how rather than the what, too. Most of the deaths are usually revealed right at the beginning in all of your writing. You don't necessarily find out, whereas I think from Death of the Salesman to all sorts of examples, they use that as sort of a melodramatic device at the end. That gives them a big emotional wallop at the end. Rather than with this, where it's very obvious that Helen is going to die at the end. But you don't know exactly how everything's going to do. And the ending isn't melodramatic at all. With them just walking in and finding her dead.
Well, this play isn't about the death of Helen Wagner. It's about the dying. There's a difference. Her death, we know is going to come. That's not the important part. It's how she's dying, and in the land of wonderful dreams, the poem here, the passings is in here. As you said, I also referenced consciously the prisoner titles for the episode because there are 17 of them, and 17 I said that's too good to pass up, and so I work in subtly some of the things from some of the titles, like the girl who would be death. We have the woman in blue in that section, in that little scene. And
well, you have layers upon layers. You have the poems, you have the prisoner titles, you have the lady in blue. You have all these passing references that add up after a while. I wanted to get to one specific one, so go on while I'm looking for it.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of them. The general. Then we had, and I have a lot of these plays. The Dirge of the Empire State that's playing in the background. And in some of the later plays that I've done after this one here, I've tried to cut back on some of the poems. I don't want to rely too much on one particular gimmick. Day 9, Many Happy Returns, is the shortest one. Lights Up on Helen Wagner. And then Danny just basically, Happy Birthday, Many Happy Returns, Happy Merry Christmas, yes, so many, everything's, they all come back to me now. I mean, that's the shortest of the scenes there. Lights up, Danny's there, and it's just a little moment, and so you get a whole different thing. That it's your funeral, a change of mind.
Yes, I want to talk about this one. This one fooled me when I read it, and I'm a good reader, and I rarely fool. But as you think that it's Helen's dream as you're beginning this, and then it's revealed at the end that it's Danny's dream. So there's a structural difference there, and it just comes out of nowhere. That this confrontation between Darla and Helen was actually all within Danny and not within Helen.
Yeah. Well, it is Danny's version because Danny wasn't there. Danny is relating what his mother had told him.
So that's actually a good reason for why she walks in that particular scene.
No, that's a good point. These are little things, and it's one of those things too. It's interesting that you pick up on that. When I read Chin writing about my poems, or he did a good analysis of my Knowing Dick chapter from A Norwegian in the Family, and the 2 or 3 plays he's looked at. It's interesting to hear people pick up on those little things, because just hearing you say that, that's a really good interpretation, and it's a good raison d'etre for why Helen walks, because it's not her aspect, it's not her memory of it, it's Danny telling about what he's heard about her. So, like I said, a lot of these plays, they interlock with each other in this way and that way, and it's just...
Poems have a good reason for being used too, in the sense that it's an emotional payoff when she's seeing all of your poems projected behind you, and you can't see them at the time.
Yeah.
You also can't see Eddie, but you see your poem Bohemian Rhapsody at the end, or at least it's implied that you've come to some kind of understanding after your mother died.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. That there are these ways to try to show the how do you show someone having a change of mind or an apotheosis here, and having Danny finally see glimpses of his own poetry that his mother could, even though his mother admits that she doesn't understand all of it, is an interesting way to play with those ideas. And it's one of those things that sort of amazes me. Like here, the play ends here. Danny is talking. He says, "What? I didn't understand what you were saying." And then the last comments are, Danny's conversation continues improvised under the sound of the same woodwind instrument flute or recorder from the end of days 11 and 15, as it plays the same wistful music that is melancholy but profound. Jessica sits on the other side of the bed from Helen's corpse and just sighs as Danny continues to talk on his cell phone with his back to the audience. And just so you know, I misspelled. There's no I in his, so I just put it there. To the audience, Helen and Eddie finally break their gaze on the scene, and Helen blows a kiss to Jessica, then to Danny, and the two of them walk off slowly, unnoticed by the living, out of the lighted area. Danny and Jess continue as they are for another half a minute or more until the music, the scrolling poem, and the light end abruptly in unison. So, in so many ways, whether it's with the poetry and the different ways to use it, having the scenes go from front to backwards in A Second Woman, having Henry walk into the face of Beethoven, having Jerry the Jew walk into the face of Goebbels. These are ways of using things, and it just amazes me that in the 21st century, so many people don't do that. And when I've looked at online at play segments and whatnot, so much of the playwriting is so dull. I was reading the plays of the black playwright, what's her name, Susan Laurie Parks. Abominable. Her plays are abominable. How is this shit getting produced? I mean, it's terrible. Reading her stuff is like reading kindergarten finger painting and comparing to my stuff that's a Vermeer or a Rembrandt or a Goya. I mean, there's just no comparison.
It's as if they've never heard a person speak.
Yeah,
in many of these plays that I read. I went through a handful of plays. They say some of the best contemporary playwrights. There's that play called Wit, which is about that ovarian cancer.
What play?
Wit. I think Michael Nichols did an HBO version of it years ago. But he's got that one. There's a few others that they've modded, like this Bengal tiger play as well. And it's as if they've never spoken before. It reminded me of, I read that book years ago, the Staggering Genius or whatever by that hack.
Yeah.
And he has the same kind of conversation that a lot of these playwrights do, where there's basically one-word answers. And, this may have some fidelity with reality. But what's the point of just watching someone take a shit and not doing anything with it?
Yeah. They don't know how to get realism with poesy. They don't understand how to do it. You can look, though, and you can take the things that Helen Wagner is saying, and if you take them out, and this is a good point. Jessica made this point about one of my plays, and I think about her own book too. Is a lot of poesy and prose comes from context. And the context is parallax. I say A, you say B. And then boom, 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 boom. As the conversation goes, you build up an energy, you build up a synergy. And so that 10, 12 exchanges in, a word that would be just flat prose, if it's in the first exchange, by the 12th exchange, takes on meaning because there's a history leading up to that word and to that context.